Good afternoon, everyone. This is Enrique Sanchez of Spanish United, founder and director. This afternoon, we have a very special guest on the show. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
My name is Lene Rachel Andersen. I am in Copenhagen. Right now, I'm actually in Norway, but I'm from Copenhagen and I wrote the book called The Nordic Secret. And I think that's why you have invited me.
That is correct, Lena. Tusen tack and welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Likewise, as we had spoken via email, I actually discovered you by chance. I'm not sure if you saw my interview with the Northwest Danish Association. I had interviewed the president pre-band before I was going to interview you, and that's how I actually discovered you. That's why I decided to contact you because I was in Norway 2 years ago, and I am very fascinated and interested in how the Nordic spirit model, or what you write in your book, can help Hispanic countries and Latin and the Hispanic diaspora have a better quality of life and learn different things. So we would like to know more about you. We would like to know more
Mhm.
about your book and how Spanish United and Hispanic people can learn about the Nordic spirit.
I would love to share more about that. I would say the secret, I'm going to reveal it, uh, is self-organized studying and learning and learning because you are interested in learning and out of curiosity and because you want to learn more about the world, not because of grades and not because you want to increase your qualifications for the job market, but because you want to be an informed citizen and informed human being in the time that you live in. And in the Nordic countries, we started doing that in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, so 150 years ago. And you could say, why on earth would you want to care about what? And this was among the rural communities, so the farming community in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden 150 years ago. Why on earth would you want to, be interested in that today? And one of the reasons is that 170 years ago, the Nordic countries were among the poorest in Europe. So uh, around 1800, we were actually the poorest in Europe. Um, and then around 1850, it kind of got a little bit better, but it wasn't until the 1860s, 70s, and 80s that we kind of started catching up economically. And around 1900, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden were among the rich countries in Europe. And then Finland was under Russian rule from the
Right.
early 1800s to early 1900s. And then once they got freedom from Russia, they made the same economic class journey in just 30 years. So we have figured out how to do education in a different kind of way in the Nordic countries, and that is the explanation behind our prosperity, stable societies, all kinds of good country qualities. And the interesting thing is that it helps to have a government that doesn't obstruct it, but it doesn't have to be a government program. This was actually started by local pastors and peasants and farmers and local bourgeoisie who were, yeah, it's probably not going to be good for anybody if we have an illiterate, uninformed peasantry and working class who just get angry. It's probably going to be wiser if they understand the world and can grasp the opportunities of industrialization. So there has been this um, focus on learning and not just academic knowledge, but also your cultural heritage and new songs and practical agricultural techniques, all kinds of things, really broad,
Mhm.
but also
Right.
deep. So yeah.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that we emphasize in Spanish United is culture over color. And we
Hmm.
want the Hispanic people in the United States to preserve their identity, learn about their identity. Like right now, we're in the process of trying to create a pilot plan. I actually based it on the Nordic model where we provide a center, a community center where Hispanic people can not only get services and help and resources, but also to educate the young people about their identity. Because right now, Hispanic people, we're the largest minority in the United States, but we're among the most persecuted, and primarily because of the issue of immigration, legal and illegal.
Right,
And the fact that
right.
since Hispanics are not an ethnicity, I mean, we're not a race for an ethnicity. Hispanic could be of any race. Hispanic could be European, African, Native American, Asian, etc. So there is also pressure on racial identity politics to force Hispanic people that look more Caucasian, look more African to take one side instead of just being Hispanic. So this is where we come in to bring all Hispanic people, regardless of their racial background and their creeds, to appreciate their culture, to appreciate their identity, because I feel that when there is structure, I believe that it will serve as a deterrent to keep a lot of the young people out of gangs, out of trouble, but at the same time they can invest, and that is something that I feel that is very crucial for the Hispanic people to progress, especially in the United States, because you actually brought about some good points. Because one of the reasons why Latin America is impoverished is not really because, as the right says, that has to do with communism, whatever. Communism is actually a reaction to the big social problem when you have cultural
Right.
elites that own 95% of the land. They don't allow the peasantry or other people to take part of the economy. And then that causes a reaction where you have communist
I mean,
revolutions in
people
Latin
get
America.
angry. I mean, if
Exactly.
you're hungry and you see no way out, you get angry. So I've traveled, I've not been to Latin America, I've been to North America, and I've been to Africa, and I've been several places in Europe, and I had a very interesting insight in an African village, where I realized that there were two villages very close to each other, and one was very well kept and belonged to one ethnic group, and then the walking distance there was another village and it was extremely poor. I mean, they were both poor, but it wasn't well kept, and the kids ran without any underpants or anything, just a stumpy t-shirt, and one little boy had a half a liter Coca-Cola bottle with water and sand in it for a toy. I mean, I've never faced such poverty face to face physically. And what I
Mm,
realized in that African village was that even if somebody there had the idea that, hey, we could grow some more tomatoes and some cabbages and take it to the market and make some money and improve things. The first step that anybody could take to make any kind of improvement would not give any kind of payoff. The second step wouldn't make a difference either. The third step wouldn't either. I mean, okay, so let's say they grew some more tomatoes and some cabbage. Then you have to take it to the market. There are no buses. And
right.
even if there were a bus, they wouldn't be able to afford a bus ticket. So, and then you would go to the market and you would sit there all day and sell, I don't know, 10 tomatoes and a head of cabbage, and then you would go back home. And so the barriers for entering the economy were just so high. It was just, you know, horrible to realize how many obstacles anybody with a bit of ingenuity and um, vision would have to, how many steps you would have to go through to make any kind of difference.
Mm,
And so it's really, once you're stuck in poverty, the chances of working yourself out of it, if there's not people with power and money who uh, contribute to creating structures where you can actually climb, for the lack of a better word,
mm,
um, it's just so hard.
mm,
So with nations in Latin America where colonialism and greed of all kinds and mismanagement and incompetent political leadership and all kinds of authoritarian leaders have just ruined not just I would say, natural resources, but also the infrastructure, the cultural and economic infrastructure that could have let people improve their lives.
Mm,
I mean, that has been damaged, and so in order to rebuild that, you have to self-organize in different ways, and you have to see different ways out of that. And education is one, definitely one
absolutely.
path.
And
Another
that's one thing
path
that, right, and
is
that's
to
what we
say, I mean, politically, say if we the local farmers could increase our yield, say 20% or 50% over the next 2 to 3 years, that would create wealth even for the wealthy people. I mean, you have to sell to sell the message somehow that it will benefit people at the top of society as well.
right.
Um, but so I definitely understand that a lot of people are seeking towards the US. But it's also and we see it in Europe with people coming from Africa and drowning in the Mediterranean because they want opportunities,
Right.
and we need to think about how can we create opportunities where we are, and in the wealthier parts of the world and of society, we need to rethink how do we uh, create opportunities for everybody and support it and create the infrastructure for it.
Right. I agree with you.
So this is a bottom up, top down collaboration that we need.
I agree with you. And that's one thing that we emphasize in Spanish United is the importance of education because unfortunately, Hispanic people, education is not a priority. And many of them come from a peon culture where they believe that education is either unattainable, is only for the wealthy, or it's only a waste of time. So when many Hispanics come here as immigrants, they don't encourage. On contrary, in many cases, unfortunately, they discourage it. And many of the young Hispanic people, they don't pursue higher education, then they get trapped in the cycle of poverty that we see today. Like you have people living in East LA, which is about 25 minutes from where I live. That's the heart of
Right.
the Mexican American community. It's still among the poorest, and the people live there like they used to live, you know, 80 years ago. While Monterey Park, which is next door, which is predominantly Chinese, is one of the wealthiest cities in the country and even in the state of California. But a lot of it has to do with education, and Hispanics slowly are understanding that education is really going to open doors to the future, not working hard because Hispanic people have been conditioned that if you work very, very hard, you work yourself to death, you work 10 jobs and you just break your whole body that you're going to hopefully succeed. And it has shown that doesn't matter how hard you work, if you don't have an education, you're not going to have a career unless you own your own business or deal drugs, unfortunately. And I feel that that is a lure that many Hispanic people are having today, that there is a temptation or a lure of easy money coming from drug trafficking. And that's causing a lot of Hispanophobia in the United States. Like there is a senator that I'm going to be interviewing on Thursday that's going to be proposing a bill that's very controversial that, God forbid, if it passes, is going to label all Hispanic gang members in the state of Oklahoma as domestic terrorists. So that means
Mm.
that that will give the authority for police to racially profile Hispanic people that are not affiliated with gangs or drug trafficking. So that is a serious problem because in that bill, he's not mentioning other ethnic groups. He's only specifically mentioning Hispanics by name. And I think that is a danger because, people in the United States associate Hispanic people with not wanting to be educated, not wanting to better themselves, and they're bringing all the drugs. So, Spanish and I is trying to counter that to try to provide other sources of not necessarily other
So that
sources of income, but other upper opportunities, another way that they could make money and do better without having to go that route because it is a danger for our community, especially for our youth.
and it's probably hitting young men and young women very differently. Um, and you have a lot of unused talent and resources in all these young people. And I mean, all nations, ethnic groups, cultures, groups of people have that. And education is the key to unlocking all the talent that is there. And so I, I return again to, to my African village experience. If you're a teenager or a young person and you can't really see a legal, relatively fast way out of poverty, a lot of young people are just gonna take the what looks like the easy route out of it because you can get fast money. And I mean, we see that with gangs in Denmark as well. They're young people who just don't see themselves as somebody who can succeed within the on the legal side of society. So it's really important that you create a culture of education, of hope, and of giving everybody the skills and ability to create a life for themselves and their community and their family, where you can prosper and yeah, raise a family and have a decent life. And from time to time, that really takes a collective effort. And if I were to say anything, I mean, I love the U.S. I've been there several years ago, and there's an individualism in the U.S. that has a lot of positive sides. But one of the downsides is that the collective getting organized and getting together and say, how do we solve this problem? And how do we make sure that we help each other? How do we build
Right.
structures that allow us to help each other and help each other's children instead of just our family helping
Right.
our own children and that family helping their children?
Right.
One of the things that we did with all this education in the Nordics was that the farmers, first the workers, created bread sales as cooperatives, and then once the workers had shown that the method of starting cooperatives worked, farmers, particularly the farmers who had been to one of these um, education folk high schools, as we call them, for young adults from the rural community, they had they had learned bookkeeping, they had studied history, they had learned some of the legislation in Denmark and knew about the institutions. Once somebody introduced the cooperatives as a way of building dairy factories together, or slaughterhouses, or egg hatcheries, chicken factories, I don't know what you call it, they were like, "Hey, we learned all that banking stuff at the folk high school. I know how to do bookkeeping. I can be on the board of one of these cooperatives because I know stuff." And that sense of, "Hey, I know stuff." It's not just an attitude. I actually do know stuff.
Mm.
And I feel comfortable about taking this responsibility. And once you feel comfortable about taking that kind of responsibility, starting an organization, drafting bylaws, being on the board and checking the books and all that stuff, you can actually create a lot of really interesting things and organize together with other people. And part of the Danish cooperative movement was also that I think it's like 2.5% of the profit should go to education. So many of these bread sales, cooperative bread sales that were started by the workers. And I mean, they were really poor. You look at Denmark today and see all these affluent people and well-organized society. Denmark was really dirt poor in the 1850s and only getting richer in the 1870s. And the workers here were, I mean, their standard of living was no different from a lot of poor Latinos in the U.S. today. So
Mhm.
they organized, and once they figured out how to start cooperatives, um, a lot of the bread that they bought from uh, bakers who sold to the poorest people, I mean, it was rye bread, sort of heavy, dark brown bricks of bread. But it wasn't just made with rye and other grains. There was all kinds of maybe some bark from trees and some I don't know, straw and stuff, because
Mhm.
it all fills your stomach, and the bakers could sell it even cheaper. So the workers, once they started their own bakeries or had made deals with some of the good bakers, they they bought bulk and they could sell to their members. And so they got real bread and they got it at affordable prices, and people, by becoming members of the cooperatives,
Hmm.
got access to education, they got democratic training, they got a dividend from the cooperatives, so they got a little, instead of constantly being in debt because you know, got your bread and other stuff on credit,
Hmm.
they suddenly every 3 months got a little bit of pocket money. So they could afford shoes to their kids or a shirt or buy sugar and coffee or whatever they could buy with that
Hmm.
extra little money they got as dividend from the cooperative. But they also learned how to organize, they learned how to
Right.
negotiate, they learned how to discuss things
Right.
and how to reach a compromise and create something together. And once they got the business up and running, then yeah, they started selling tea and coffee and uh other things, I don't know, some clothing and all kinds of stuff. So um I guess they would also be selling, yeah, sugar, canned goods, maybe some imported goods that they would otherwise never, that would have been completely out of reach for them. So they just, improved their own situation by collaborating, and
Right.
that's a it's a piece of history. It's a story that we've been very bad at telling each other, and realizing that if you go together, 15, 20, 30 people who have a shared vision and organize, you can actually accomplish a lot.
Right. And
Particularly
that,
in the place like the US where you do have an infrastructure for all
right.
kinds of stuff.
That's what we're trying to do. Like, we're trying to get Hispanics, regardless of their national origin, to work together, because Hispanics, what we have in common more than other ethnic groups is that, we may come from different countries, but we share the same language. And how easy for
Yep.
everyone to work together if you speak the same language. Like, you have Asian Americans or Asian immigrants here that they may look the same to you and me, but they all speak different languages. Like, a Chinese cannot understand what a Japanese is saying, or a Korean
Right.
answering a Japanese, vice versa. But they work together. Hispanic people can work
Mm.
together as well, and they will be more successful. The issue is that there's a lack of unity. There is a lack of community. There is also a lack of not wanting to organize, because there is tribalism, unfortunately,
Mm.
and the fact that many Hispanic people have been conditioned that if you sell out, as they say, you become self-loathing, you hate yourself, you become ashamed of yourself, and
Mm.
you persecute your own people. Hey, you could move up and become part of the become of the white wealthy class. So you see many Hispanic people that vote and go against their own interests, and I really feel that it's a travesty, because you have a lot of Hispanics that could do a lot of good for their community, but because of identity politics and lobbyists that bribe these Hispanic leaders that could do good for their people, they go against their own interests for votes. And I feel that,
So,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
right. Yeah, I mean, you're mentioning identity politics, and I would like to promote a cultural identity actually, because what you get from culture, the more culture you absorb, so to speak, the more culture you practice, the more culture you study, the more culture you know about, the more culture that you make your own. And I would absolutely encourage everybody to be bicultural, because the more you know the more you know of two cultures, the more you can see things from the perspective of one culture, and look at the other one, and vice versa. But
Oh,
the
absolutely.
more
Like,
culture, the more culture you have made your own, the
uh,
more um opportunities, or the bigger your symbolic world is. This sounds very abstract, but the more you can express, the more you can express yourself, the more you can decipher in the world around you, the more details you can see in the news, in other cultures, in social structures, in social interaction, in other cultures, and in the institutions that you need to deal with. And so the more culture you study and the or participate in, whatever you want to call it, the richer and deeper and broader your inner world is going to be. And some of that culture, I mean, that can be traditional singing, it can be dancing. There is something to just coordinating your bodies together with other people and having that sense of a we that comes from dancing, that comes from music. So this is not just education for, I mentioned banking notes and all that stuff. You need some of that too. But culture has a value of its own as a way of getting to know who you are and to figuring out what is important to you. Because if you study your history and you learn the songs and you make the vocabularies in all these old songs and fairy tales for that matter, folklore of all kinds. The more you make that your own, the richer your ability to express yourself becomes. And you will get a richer and fuller language, but also a richer and fuller understanding of yourself and where you're coming from. And if you can do that with the Hispanic language that the Spanish language that you grew up with, you will also be able to see richer nuances in the English speaking culture that you're part of. So, culture is really, really important. And we've, for the past, I don't know why, but the past, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years, we have really downplayed the importance of culture, and we have the market, and now we also have identity politics, which is about your physical body and nothing to do with your culture. So, and I mean, your physical body is always going to be with you. Uh, when it's not with you anymore, it's because you're usually because you're dead. Um, but if your identity is 100% tied up to your physical body, whether it's skin color or sex or whatever it is, um, you're stuck with something that others cannot share with you. But if you're identifying with culture, and culture is where you focus your attention on identity, you can actually exchange it with other people.
Mm.
And you can expand your horizon, you can learn new stuff, and you can even meet people who are different from you, coming from other cultures, and learn something from their culture that might make sense as a new part in the culture that you're coming from, and that is your culture. And you can get a deeper understanding of both their culture and your own culture the more you know in advance.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
um so when I say self-organized studying and self-organizing together as a group, that self-organizing might just as well be singing and dancing evenings with traditional food and uh, a discussion of, I don't know, could be a topic in the news, or it could be more of a philosophical discussion or discussing what you've been singing. But education, we think of education as sort of book knowledge, and you sit on a chair in a classroom and then you have to grasp things that are hard. Education can also be fun and meaningful because you're learning new things that are pleasurable. And so it's really important to create those venues for that, and um, and tell stories and let young people and children know where you're coming from, and to have grandparents and others share the wisdom and traditions that were in their childhood, because that, whether you are aware of it or not, those kinds of knowledge strands, I guess you can call it, that run through generations, they are yours anyway, because if you relate to your parents and your grandparents, their meaning making becomes part of how you make sense of the world. And so the more of it you can know, the better you can also know yourself and understand your family, and the richer your understanding of where they are coming from and yourself, where you're coming from.
Absolutely.
It's just
I do
stronger
believe
and richer. So
I
yeah.
I do believe that if there and that when there's emphasis on culture, people are willing more to learn. Like Spanish Unite has been able to grow, primarily has it grown, is because we've been able to include everybody from all walks of life, no matter where we come from. And I feel that by working together and investing in making like you know programs for the people to learn about their culture and where they come from, I think it could have many benefits. Well, anyway, Lana, we have come to the end of our time, but I wanted to tell you, thank you so much for being on the show. You have been a very excellent guest, and for your listeners in Copenhagen, Denmark, who want to reach out to us, we are on all social media platforms. We are on Spanish United YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And as soon as I finish with this recording, I will email it and text it to you, and you could share it with everyone over there. And I look forward and seeing you this Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
And likewise, thank you for inviting me. If I should just, promote my little webinar on Thursday, it's about better learning without goals. So it's along the same theme.
Okay, perfect. Tusen tack and have yourself a wonderful evening.
Thank you, and likewise.
Bye bye.